My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I have Sujatha Sivarajah, and she is the Vice President of Strategic Execution and Operational Excellence, Biopharma and Provider Solutions for McKesson, Canada. That's a big handful, that title. So, Sujatha, thank you so much for joining. And yeah,
Thank you for having me, Ara. Nice to be here.
perfect. Well, the general theme of my kind of like the conversations we have is always where you are today in terms of personally and professionally is usually um, some kind of formative influence or events that kind of happen in your childhood or teenage years that kind of influence kind of where you are today. So why don't we start with that? Like in terms of what was your childhood like? What were your formative teenage years like? And how do you think that kind of impacted, where you are today?
Okay. So yes, thanks again for having me, Ara. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. So yeah, my journey has been an interesting one. I was born in Sri Lanka in Jaffna. I left when I was about 3 and actually spent about 2 years in the US. My father was completing his master's in surveying in Columbus, Ohio, and so I actually attended kindergarten there. And after 2 years in the US, we went to Nigeria. And so I grew up in Nigeria. My formative years were spent there. And it was a wonderful experience. It was such a unique experience, but at the time, as children, one doesn't know that how unique of an experience it was. But it really helped shaped a lot of who I am today and influenced a lot of my worldview and outlook and interactions and all the accompaniments that come with growing up in that unique environment.
Yeah, because I think I read something where you spoke very highly of your father, like he was your first mentor. And as a relatively new father, and I have a daughter myself, it's like, like something you think about, like, because I'm pretty much seeing like not a scientific experiment, but in the sense that how your dad raised you and kind of impacted you now, many, many years down the line, like you're seeing the fruits of that kind of, I guess, his parenting. So for me, um, I guess number one, maybe speak a bit more on that. And number two, what advice would you give to, parents out there as they parent their kids and kind of, because, the natural tendency is, you know, um, you have an interest in something, so you want to kind of get your kids into that so you can kind of bond over that. But really, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, is that, and I think you also spoke about this as well, which is let your kids lead with their interests and kind of become fans of what they're doing so you can kind of build connection through that. But that's just kind of what I'm thinking. But again, you're ahead of the curve on me here, both from like the end result of what your father did with you and like where you are with your kids. So yeah, maybe speak on that as well.
I'm still work in progress, Ara. So there's no end result. It's an ongoing journey. And I want to shout out to my mom as well before I speak about my dad. She was very much an influence too, and especially in my early years, more from setting expectations, around education and academics and making sure that we sat when we need to and did our homework when we needed to, and so from that perspective, she was a big influence. But about my dad and the influence he had on me, I think it was very much more of a relationship building that 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 he was able to foster with me that enabled me to be my true authentic self. He was very much, even from a young age, he was more like a friend, and obviously he was a parent, and he was very much a parent. But there was um, an ability to be very open. I have candid conversations. He would express his worldview, and that really got me interested in from a young age in what's going on in the world around us. Geopolitically, I became obsessed with watching the news and understanding what's going on in the world, and a lot of that had to do because of very early conversations from a young age with my dad about what's going on in the world. And so I think, and that has absolutely influenced a lot of who I am today. Just because I have that interest, I have that desire to learn more, I have that wanting to bring context into everything, because not everything is as it seems. And so having, to understand the underlying sort of factors behind what's going on in the world today and in the past was very important. And having someone like my father to speak with, and an authority figure, but he was also very, he was able to come down to my level as a child and speak with me in a way that didn't make me feel like I was not, my input wasn't valued. So I think that was very important. And obviously at the time I didn't know it. It was just a natural discussion between father and daughter. But looking back, that is what happened. So and then he influenced me in other ways as well when it came to my education. He was a lecturer in the university in Nigeria, but his passion was math and physics, and so he taught that to me and made me really fall in love with math and physics, which then enabled me to choose my field of career, which is in engineering. So those are all things that that he was able to help support me with and enabled me to
Uh,
get to where I am.
so what made you kind of do, I mean, I guess you kind of hinted at that, but even though like all these things maybe influence you subconsciously, but you made the conscious decision to do electrical engineering at U of T, and I was part of the EC program as well there. So shout out to
Great.
UT.
Yeah.
Um, but I think like when, at least when I was in the program, and I think you're a little bit older than me, like I feel like with engineering, especially like electrical engineering. Like I remember like a lot of the females in the engineering program were in like other ones like manufacturing engineering or chemical. So EC was very like male dominated. What made you choose EC, like or I guess electrical engineering specifically? And like what was that like going through the program? And eventually, we'll talk about your career as well, but what was that experience like being a woman of color in a very male dominated subgroup of engineering?
Okay, there was a lot there to unpack, but I'll start. So, okay, I wish I had a more interesting story to tell about why electrical engineering, but truth be told, I knew I wanted to do engineering as a career and to progress in that field because I loved math and physics. I wasn't very good in much else. I did love biology as well, but I think I tended towards the other subjects more. Why electrical? It was a very practical decision. At the time that I got into university, it was one of those fields that that were, look more lucrative in terms of job opportunities and what was out there. So it wasn't that I absolutely loved designing circuits and, was building or rebuilding computers. That wasn't the case. It was more from a practical decision standpoint that I chose that field. It was more competitive for sure. That put the extra pressure on me to, to do as well as I couldn't get in, but I did. And interesting that you mentioned about the male dominated. Absolutely, my graduating class, 10% were females, which is actually quite high compared to some other years. But I wasn't the only woman of color in my class, which was amazing. There were two other Sri Lankan Tamil girls actually, and that was a rarity. So it was the one year that was like that, and I don't know that it continued that way after or before. But it was a very interesting time, and it's definitely much before your time era. So yeah, it was great. Being in a male dominated field, even after graduation, and we can talk about my career, was something I was very used to. I adapted to it. It didn't really impact me in a negative way, so to speak. I really did not feel different in that sense. I think my male colleagues and classmates were very accommodating and treated me very much like an equal. So I can't say that it was very, from that perspective, that I faced a lot of discrimination or inequality from that point of view. Did that answer your question?
No, no, for sure. And I only remember like EC because as like a young man going into a program and like you're like, hoping to make friends, but also maybe potential partner. I just remember it being very skewed and I was like, this is if you're looking for that, it's a very skewed, if you're a guy at least going in, but which is why I didn't spend a lot of time in the engineering kind of area of school, like because the St. George campus is so big. But I was just curious about your experience as a female as well in the program.
Yeah, it was definitely skewed. And I'll tell you, all the engineers, there was a chant at the time in U of T engineering, and it was all about who do we like? We like nurses because there were no females in engineering. And so there was a disparity between the engineers and nurses in the gender balance. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so I know like coming out of school, once you completed school, you worked at a few places before, I would love to kind of go through all of them, but Me particularly, I wanted to kind of start the story maybe at like Life Labs, just because when I came across your story, for whatever reason, I'm fascinated by Life Labs as an organization. I'm not sure why. So I'd love to kind of hear about your time there, what you did, and like really kind of, because you've been through two different kinds of companies in different kinds of roles, also touching later on in terms of how you get these opportunities. Are these opportunities that you're generating yourself? Are people reaching out to you? Are you using a recruiter? But, we'll kind of start with your time at Life Labs and we'll kind of expand from there.
Absolutely. I can definitely start at Life Labs, but maybe just to provide a little bit of context, I can go a little bit earlier in time. So when I graduated, it's funny because you mentioned manufacturing engineering. That that's been the sort of backbone of my career. Even though I studied electrical engineering in university, my first job was at Ford. And that to me was the most in fact impactful job that I've had in my career, was the very first job that I had. And so I'd like to speak a little bit about that because that just sets the context for whatever happened in the, going forward. So I got the job at Ford during a time of a recession in Canada. And it was very much, oh, this is just a stopgap job until I find my real job as an electrical engineer. It was still an engineering job. It was a process engineering job in manufacturing. And so me not knowing anything about, the world when it comes to working life of an engineer, I took on the role, and I ended up absolutely loving it. So what started off as being just a temporary foray into process engineering and manufacturing engineering ended up being my career from the get go. I was very lucky to find a career that I loved. I loved working with people. I loved working on the manufacturing floor. I loved working with processes and optimizing efficiencies, and all of that spoke to me and became my passion. So I was at Ford for about 8 years, and then I completely switched industries and I went into medical devices. So I went into another organization that had a completely different manufacturing model, going from thousands of volume a day of product at Ford to maybe 10 a month at the company that I moved to. I was there, and then I went to LifeLabs. So how I got the LifeLabs job, it's a very interesting story. So, what had happened was it was for a process engineering manager. That was what the role was for Life Labs. And when I interviewed with, at the time, he was the VP of operations at Life Labs. He had basically indicated, he was very frank with me. He said, "This is a job that nobody knows I'm recruiting for. I had to leverage another job posting to hire you. Nobody knows what process engineering is at Life Labs at the time. So I'm hiring you to prove your worth and value, to show, what process engineering can do, because he was an engineer and he knew that there was a need for that entity within Life Labs, and there wasn't one. Um, and crazy as it was, because I already had a job, I wasn't desperate to take this one. I said yes. I took a job. It was a manager of one. It was me and only me. I was the sole person in the role, and of course, what he said was, as you show value and as you can deploy more projects, you can hire, but you can't. I don't have the ability to provide a team to you at the moment. So you have to build your own team, but first you have to show value. So that's what happened. For the first 6 or 7 months, it was just me in the organization in my role. A lot of it was explaining what I did. I remember walking the hallways of Life Labs, and people would literally stop me and we would have a chat, and they would genuinely ask me, "So what is an engineer doing in a lab diagnostics company?" And so it went from that, and I basically started from ground level. I had already about 15, 20 years of working, not 20, 15 years of working experience prior to that, but I started from the bottom. I spent some time in the labs. I spoke to people. I said, if there's any challenge that you have, I'll take it and see what I can do to help you. Little by little, started building trust, showing, through small gains, what I can do, what is the gap that they didn't even know existed that I can fill. Because a lot of times in organizations, you don't know what you don't know. And so you work a certain way just because that's the way it's always been. When somebody comes and says, "Hey, there's another way of doing things. There's an optimal way of doing things. There's another view that we have."
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
That's great. That's a value add. So I started to do that. Eventually, I was able to build my small team. I wasn't fired because that could have been the other option. Um, Needless to say, and then I absorbed a counterpart in BC who was also sort of on his own running a team. We merged teams and I led the entire process engineering team. It still exists today, even after I left. So that's just a testament to the value that this team brings and the need that they had. But it was also a risk that I took, but a very impactful risk because that led me to then becoming the director of the team and then taking on more accountabilities within LifeLabs. So it just grew and grew, and my role grew as I sort of took on more accountabilities and brought me to the next phase of my career.
That's very interesting. It sounds like you had a very, I guess the term is intrapreneur kind of experience almost, where like you had,
Perhaps, yeah, I never thought about it that way, but you're right. That sort of was a little bit of what happened.
because essentially you're like saying, hey, like it's almost like a startup within a company, like a bigger company where it's like you have to prove your value. Like they're not going to give you any resources until you have like a proof of concept that shows value. Then you hire people and it kind of snowballs. Pretty much like building a company within a company. So it's pretty fascinating. And I think it's just an interesting example of people always kind of talk about entrepreneurship and having to be outside of a company to have that kind of experience. But you were able to kind of have that experience within an established organization to kind of still get the experience, but without kind of the risk of entrepreneurship. And
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what happened.
awesome. Well,
And it went from being tapped in the hallway, being asked what I did, to being tapped on the hallway, asking for resources from my team because they needed them on such and such a project because they knew what we were able to develop a mandate and a strategy and actually show value.
so like it seems like you had this great experience. You got to build from the ground up, built a team, had some significant impact at LifeLabs. So what made you leave and kind of I think you joined Sanofi, if I said that correctly, and got into kind of the world of pharmaceutical manufacturing. So talk about that.
Mhm. So I was with LifeLabs for about 7 years, and by that time, as with many people, there's a peak in terms of career growth and in terms of the impact that has been made. I could have stayed on, definitely. There was still more work to be done, but I felt like I had a team. They were established. They were doing what they needed to do, and as a leader, and I learned this, as I organically grew into leadership. My role as a leader, any leader, is really to position yourself so you're not needed anymore. So when you develop a team that is self-sufficient and is capable of so-called, so to speak, running the show, you're done. Your job is done, but you've done your job. So I was kind of at that place at Life Labs where I felt, I could definitely do more, but I also felt like I had done quite a, I had achieved my mandate, so to speak. And at the same time, an opportunity came up at Sanofi and this is becoming a theme of my career in the latter part of my career, to take on a team that didn't exist, to build a team. So I was hired to lead the digital transformation within the Toronto site, and digital very specifically around what they call manufacturing 4.0 or smart factory. This is very much digital transformation for operations. So not social media digital, not the infrastructure of digital, but very much operational tools and methodologies to optimize manufacturing. And so, because towards the end of my career at Life Labs, I had taken on some of those activities, I was hired at Sanofi because of my experience at LifeLabs. So that was one of the things that LifeLabs, one of the many things that I credit my time at LifeLabs, was because I was given a lot of opportunities. I was able to learn, and I was able to leverage opportunities that were given to me to then go to other opportunities. And the digital role that I had at Sanofi was one of those examples. So yeah, so I headed the digital team, again, team of maybe two, because when I took over, there was somebody else there, but my mandate was to grow the team again, which I did, and delivered on a roadmap that was provided both by our global sort of digital team, but also we had to develop tools and solutions internally that met the needs of the Toronto site specifically. And then about 2 years, 1.5 years into my tenure, I was given another portfolio to manage, which was the portfolio management office at Sanofi. So then I had my digital team as well as the portfolio management office. So added accountabilities again. Yeah, and the portfolio management office was comprised of the project management office, strategy execution. It comprised of risk and business continuity, and a few other disparate teams that I had under my umbrella.
Yeah, the your philosophy and leadership is very similar to in the startup world or like just building a business. Um, as a leader or like founder, your job is eventually to fire yourself from all the jobs. So like you might start off by doing sales, marketing, accounting, but eventually you want to fire yourself from as many jobs as possible so the thing you built can kind of run without you. So it's very interesting that your leadership kind of philosophy is very similar, which is build up the thing that you need to build up to a point where you're no longer needed, and then at least you have a very clear indicator that you're not needed. You're no longer needed, and you can go help build something else. So that's pretty interesting. Pharmaceutical manufacturing. I mean, I think I have an idea what that means, but maybe can you break that down in terms of is that the actual like creation of like a drug like a Tylenol or like what is it, what is that? What does this mean, this term?
So there are many, there are many aspects of pharmaceutical manufacturing. The one that I was affiliated with at Sanofi was vaccines manufacturing. So the site in Toronto manufactured pediatric vaccines. So, the vaccines that you would have probably had administered to your children when they were babies would have come from the Toronto site. We supply a good portion in terms of market share across the world from this Toronto site. So it's a really complex process starting from, seeds, they ferment. There's a whole process of a science and methodology behind it. To the end product, which is then the vaccine. So there's a component of getting the vaccines and then packaging the vaccines as well. And there's an end-to-end manufacturing process that's associated with all of that.
During the pandemic, there was this whole talk about Canada lacking manufacturing capacity to create vaccines or just, like pharmaceutical manufacturing in general. Um, I've never heard of Sanofi until I kind of obviously, wanted to interview you. But is that comment accurate then? And is it still accurate today in terms of did Canada make improvements to increase its capacity to manufacture pharmaceutical, I guess, drugs or vaccines?
I think over the course of the pandemic and the last 4 or 5 years, Canada has invested quite heavily in that. So just to give you an example, for Sanofi, there was a huge investment made into what they call a pandemic readiness facility. And so the idea being, which is actually this facility is it's almost completed, but from a construction point of view, it will go live in a few years. And that is to enable the packaging and filling of drugs or vaccines at this site. So one of the constraints during the pandemic was the inability for Canada to procure vaccines and to manufacture a portion of it. So even though we may not necessarily manufacture the actual vaccine, there was also a component of packaging, filling in syringes, packaging it, that also wasn't there. So theoretically, if this facility is up and running, the idea would be or could be that we could purchase the drug from any source and package and fill it here, which would alleviate some of the constraints that we would have had otherwise. And so definitely, I believe the government has made some improvements and invested in that realm. Are we completely covered if there's another pandemic? Probably not, but we'll be in a much better state than we were the last time.
And then, obviously after Sanofi, you got the current role, which I think you're 6 or 7 months into at McKesson. So again, I've never heard of McKesson. So part of my curiosity is like learning about what these companies do and obviously what you do there and what the impact that you hope to have as well. So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, so McKesson is actually one of those companies that nobody really has heard about, or very few people have, but it actually is the largest pharmaceutical distributor in Canada. They deliver about one third of medications for all Canadians. They're huge when it comes to distribution. Yeah, of our medications. So that is the bulk of what McKesson does. The division that I'm affiliated with is around rare diseases. So McKesson Specialty Health, we got rebranded recently. So it used to be Biopharma, but it's now Specialty Health, and it's all about providing an end-to-end service of specialty drugs that are for rare diseases, certain type of cancers, and cystic fibrosis, for example, and many many more. But it's an end-to-end service of care right from the time that a patient is enrolled into a program with a particular medication to providing the medication itself with our specialty pharmacies, and also to administering the drug at some of our clinics.
So you
So
guys
that's what.
manufacture, so you guys manufacture the drugs, but also have like the retail pharmaceutical locations to dis distribute it, or?
Yeah, no, no, we don't manufacture the drugs. We work with drug
Oh,
manufacturers,
I see.
so pharmaceuticals. So those would be, our customers, so to speak, and we work with them to then provide the service to the patient,
I see. Okay, got it.
and we obviously distribute the drugs as well from our pharmacy network.
Got it. And like what are you hoping? Because you're like relatively new to the role, and most of your roles you've kind of done, 5 to 7 years. So what are you hoping by the end of your time at McKesson, whatever that is? What are you hoping to do, like in terms of your impact?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I was hired, this role is actually a new role to the business unit. It is very much focused on operational excellence and executing on strategic projects. So part of my mandate is to develop a mandate or to strengthen the mandate that already exists, and to really be part of the transformation journey that specialty health is on. And there's a huge push to get us positioned so that we can then go through this transformation of growth that is um, that is going to be part of specialty health's mandate and journey. So in terms of the impact to make, it's to make sure that we serve as the foundational support services for all of specialty health's um, businesses, and that we support the growth and we enable the growth in those aspects when it comes to delivering on projects, when it comes to finding operational efficiencies, when it comes to shared services that we then take on and drive.
Throughout your kind of very extensive career, you've taken on obviously progressively more and more, or maybe there's different types of roles, but obviously more involved roles. But I know that you made a comment about like work-life balance and kind of really adjusting that dial according to kind of what life stage you're at. Um, so how do you kind of think about career and balancing the rest of your life, whatever your other kind of obligations, including family, are? Love to hear about that.
That's a very good question, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. It's interesting. Interesting. I mean, my husband and I were empty nesters now. My children are, you know, they've moved on to the next phase of their life and education. And I always thought when my children, were at this stage that I would have a lot more free time and I would be able to do so much more. But I think because my career progressed as well, at the same time, I'm finding that I'm busier now than I've ever been before. And that's just because of the pressures of the job and the role. So finding that balance is actually something I am still trying to dial in and trying to find a better approach when it comes to work-life balance. And I think, for me, it's more in the recent past that I've, come to the realization that I do need to take a step back and allow myself to the grace and space to be a little bit more balanced in my work, and spend equal amount of time focusing on health and wellness and everything else. So, but it isn't an ongoing journey. It is not something I figured out, and but something that I know I need to focus on more.
Interesting comment you made about kind of being busier than ever. Because I think it's called Parkinson's law, where I think it says work expands to the time allotted to it. Where when I was away on my trip, like I was doing some work, but I kind of had I set very little time to kind of do it. And I found that I was very efficient at getting the core things I need to get done while in that time versus if I give myself more time, I just kind of find work to do that instead of kind of just like saying, "Hey, I've done everything I need to today. Let me start working on stuff for tomorrow." So it's just like interesting that you kind of made that comment because I think about
It's
that a
so
lot.
true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I think that's a very valid point.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
I think because there's little distractions elsewhere,
Yeah.
I am sort of spending more time. But yeah, so it's when to dial it back, right? Knowing when to step out and sort of not do it all at the same time. I think that's the challenge.
And for, for like a young person kind of listening to this, because you're like ahead of them career-wise, I think I asked you this earlier and want to kind of expand on it, but some of these opportunities, it seems like they've kind of searched you out. I'm not sure if you advise someone to like, or if you've done this yourself, where you're actively like, hey, I want to work at this company in this type of role, and you're kind of headhunting yourself, or are like, and if you're being found, how are you being found? Like, are you going to like networking events? Are you using like a recruiter? Maybe kind of talk or give advice about that.
Yeah. So I always say if someone was to tell me that I would be where I am today in my career, even I would say 10 years ago, I would find that hard to believe. And so I did not chart my course. I did not, find these companies that I wanted to align with and, work for. And none of that happened. It was very much organic. A lot of times I was recruited for the role. The last few, that was the case. Some I put myself out there but I didn't network too much. It was a combination of, applying for roles, but also being found. And I think the last few were more being found. I will say LinkedIn is an amazing an amazing way to be recruited because my last few jobs were through LinkedIn. um, but in terms of me being strategic about the type of roles in the company, no, that was not the case at all. I think the advice that I would give, and but this is what worked for me. My career trajectory was very much stable until the last, I would say, 11 years, where things just took flight. And that was only because I was at the right place at the right time, and I was able to leverage all the learnings that I had from the work that I did in the past and take it to the next level. One thing that I know, because I lead teams and I have people, that are part of my team, is there's a lot of sometimes impatience with especially the younger generation. Everybody wants to do the next thing tomorrow. My advice always is that's great. Having career aspirations is wonderful, but never lose sight of what you were hired to do. Do that and do it really, really well, and then you will, believe me or not, get noticed. And so I think that's what happened with me. I took on whatever role I had. I took it as a challenge. I did my best, but that enabled me to get to the next level and to the next level and to the next level. And so that was one thing. The other thing is I never said no to a challenge. And so even though it was outside my comfort zone, I took it and I learned, and I was able to leverage that then for my next career positioning. And so one example is around the digital transformation. When I was at LifeLabs, the company wanted to sort of invest in digital technology. And so I was asked to be involved in that. And, I could have put my hand down, or I could have, been a bit shy of it, but I didn't, and I took the challenge on, and I learned, and I was able to then leverage, and I progressed, and I was able to leverage that for my next role. So that's the other advice is, when you're given an opportunity comes by, unless it's completely not within your realm of expertise, and there's just no way you can grow into it, take the opportunity that's given and grow into it. So yeah, those are the two things that's worked for me and that has helped me.
Your advice is, I resonate with it, but I think of like all these memes I see where I think one picture is like there's like a lineup for like path to success. It's just like, consistent, compounded hard work. And then the other line is like, something else that's like a shortcut. And everyone wants a shortcut, but that's not the real solution. It's like the actual, like most solutions are pretty simple in the sense that you know what you need to do, but most people don't want to execute. Like for example, with health, you lose weight by eating less calories than you consume, or like you burn more calories than you consume. that's the simple answer. But then there's all these things around that that kind of confuse people. And I think it's the same thing with career. Everything you just said, I'm a big advocate of. Um, I think of this, I think story or like probably like around the internet where, like a shipbuilder or like a ship engineer got called onto a job and he fixed it within 10 minutes. It was like a very simple fix. And the bill was like 50,000. They're like, why should we pay you for 10 minutes of work? He's like, it took me 20 years of kind of doing what I do to find out what the problem was. You paid me $50,000 for that, not for my 10 minutes of time. So I just kind of align with what you said.
That's very true. Exactly. No, and I'm not exactly. And obviously, that's not to say that people shouldn't be pursuing and shouldn't be, aggressive in their career growth and trajectory. But build a foundation, because that is what's going to set you or set one up for success, in the future. That 20 years of experience, whatever it may be, 20 or 10 or 5, build it and build it in a way that's very solid that can be leveraged for other opportunities.
I think you can be aggressive with career progression if you are aggressive with value creation. So if you are
Hmm.
creating a
Right.
lot more value than you ask for, it's a no-brainer to the people that are paying you. Like, hey, I want this or this kind of role. Here's what I delivered. I know that I'm younger than you, but I feel like even people younger than me, I just hear the sentiment. It seems like a sense of entitlement. Maybe it's like a very small data set, but it's just like, yeah, just there's no shortcut. Like you got to pay your dues, and that's just kind of how generally it works, unless you get very lucky. But yeah,
Very true. I mean, of course, there are exceptions.
yeah,
There are definitely exceptions to that rule, and but it's more the norm, I find.
yeah.
And I think the other thing that you don't want as someone that's starting off in the profession is to be promoted to their level of incompetence, right? Like so, you go for the next promotion, but at some point you're going to plateau.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is if you plateau too early, there's also not just knowing the job and doing the job. There's also emotional maturity and experience that comes to being a leader and to being in those more senior roles. And that doesn't come overnight. Obviously, you have to go through and get the experience. And it's a combination of both. It's the emotional maturity and knowing how to do the role and the technical competence. And that's a critical part of being in a leadership role.
Yeah, when you said plateau, it kind of triggered something I read recently where it's about athletes where, when you pick up something new, you kind of learn quickly because obviously you don't know very little and you're like learning a lot. But then you kind of get to this plateau and a lot of skill building is kind of in this really boring area where you don't realize you're getting better until one day, like, you know, you're working, like, for example, tennis, like you're just doing all these boring drills, and then all of a sudden one day you're hitting backhands and forehands seamlessly. But it's like a lot of nothing, or what feels like nothing, till this moment where like it's like visually apparent. So I don't know. It's just like I think a lot of people, including myself, before I kind of read about these things, struggled with that because the results of what you were hoping to do wasn't apparent until like, it's like you're doing years of things with nothing, no benefit, then all of a sudden you get a ton of benefits. So it's just kind of really sticking it out until you get to that point where all the work you put in kind of shows off. So
That's a great analogy. That's exactly it. It's all the stuff that you're doing to build a foundation before you can then take off. And the foundation isn't strong, it doesn't set one up for success in the long run. It may be a short-term situation.
yeah, it's like there's a reason that companies, I forgot what the law or principle is, but the longer something's been around, the longer it takes to destroy it or for it to go away. So people talk about Facebook's like 20 years old and people are like, oh, Facebook is outdated or like people are not using it. But it's 20 years old and it's like big. Like I don't think people realize like, yeah, okay, maybe you don't use it as often, but I don't think it's not gonna go away anytime soon. And there's companies in Japan that have been around for like hundreds of years or thousands of years in the same family. There's a reason why those companies will not go away or like it'll be harder to kind of destroy them. So yeah.
It's true. And obviously, I mean, we also have to adapt, though. We cannot
Yes.
stay stagnant. I mean, we know all about the blockbusters and all of those. So, I
Yes.
mean, and that applies to us as well. And that's why the other thing that I wanted to add, which I didn't add, which is very important, is that continuous learning mindset. Because as you're building your foundation and as you're gaining that experience and sort of positioning oneself for growth, you have to constantly adapt and learn. And adaptability is the name of the game. Being able to pivot and adapt. And I know those are buzzwords, but they're really, really where it's at. So yes, I think making sure that we're always, I still have that continuous learning mindset, and I need to in order to to be where I am and to continue in my journey. And so I think that's critical for anyone, especially these days, more than even before.
So I know you've had like a very extensive career in the engineering world, but you also talked about, and I'll let you kind of speak on it, but if for some reason you're not allowed to like do that job anymore, like this kind of role, what would be your kind of alternative or like, a job that you would love to do if you weren't kind of in this world?
I would have been an archaeologist, or something in the anthropology anthropology.
Anthropology. I always get tripped up with that too.
That was a bit of things, but no, I'm fascinated by history. I'm fascinated by how people lived, like 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, where they lived, the structures they built, why did they decline? Why did societies decline? How did they rise? Yeah, that fascinates me. So I would have been very much involved in something related to that field.
It's fascinating because with history and like everything you kind of mentioned, I think people like neglect history, but if you like really look at history, a lot of history repeats itself in patterns in terms of the very things you mentioned. Why does an empire grow? Why does it decline? I think we're kind of seeing that in today's times in terms of, certain countries increasing influence and certain countries' influence going down. History is kind of a lot of the stuff is right there. You just have to like read it. So, um, you talked about anthropology. I was a big fan of the show Bones. I don't know if you saw. Yeah.
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so she's an anthropologist and like it's a very
Ah,
fascinating show. I think you would like it. It's like mix of
okay.
anthropology plus mystery. So yeah.
I'll add that to my list.
So okay, interesting. And a reflective question for you guys is if, you talked about like if you talked to yourself 10 years ago, you were like you would have never thought you would be where you are today. But talking to 16-year-old Sujatha, like what would be the advice you would give her? Yeah, what would be advice you'd give her?
Yeah, 16-year-old Sujatha. It's funny because 16 is when I was 16 when I came to Canada. And so 16-year-old Sujatha saw a lot of transformation, a lot of change. Came from Nigeria, living a certain lifestyle, school, friends, everything was a certain way, and then completely get thrown in to a completely different environment. So that was a very transition, like a year of huge transformation for me. So it's interesting that that age was what you had asked about. So I think for me, I think what I would have told her was, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay that you're not, you feel a little out of place because, you come at 16. It's a very difficult age because you're sort of established in a way, as a person, your individuality is sort of being set at the same time you've come into a completely different environment. And so I think that's what I would have told her, that things will be okay. You will eventually and very soon actually adapt and be where you need to be, and it's okay to be different, and to have a little bit of what is it, to feel a little challenged that way. It's all growth. It's part of being resilient, and it's part of your journey in the future. So take it, learn from it, and don't be overwhelmed by it.
And looking forward in terms of your personal legacy, in a few sentences, like how would you want to be described or remembered by your family and friends?
Favorably, I hope.
That's good.
I think as many people, or as probably everyone, you want to be remembered as someone that's first of all a good human being, someone that try to do good and make an impact. But at the granular level, for me, I think it's being a good mother, wife, daughter, sister, um, to the people that I can immediately influence and impact. Beyond that, I would like, and there's still the journey ahead for me, and where I'd like to focus a little bit more on societally, what I can do to maybe bring some change and in a small way, whatever that is. I'm very passionate about um, helping and serving in some way and capacity. And I know, when my career is done and I move to the, plan B or next phase of my evolution, I would like to be more involved in the community and giving back. So hopefully that will be written a few years from now when I have a chance to do a little bit more, because I feel like there's more that I need to do in that respect.
Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
Okay, well, that's a good segue into the final segment of the podcast. It's a fun game or speed run I like to call Creator Confessions. I'm going to say a bunch of statements and you'll tell me the first thing that pops to mind. Ready?
Oh boy. Okay.
Favorite Tamil food?
Mutton curry.
If there's like a fire, flood, and you only have time to take two things with you, it can't be people or pets. What would those two things be?
The hard drive that has all the pictures, all our digital pictures from at least when we started storing pictures, and my phone, because
Something
it has everything in it.
something that scares you.
Ooh. The well-being of my children, making sure that my family is all right. And if, I guess as a mother, constantly worried about, even though they're adults, yes, that scares me. I just want them to be well and good.
An insecurity that you have.
Um, that's a good one. I think for me, and I had an imposter syndrome, and I still do to some degree have it, believe it or not. So I think it's just the insecurity around adapting to things as quickly as I need to, and being able to do that, I think is something that I'm working on.
Favorite TV show you're watching?
Ooh, so I watch a lot of the crime dramas. So limited series crime dramas. I actually don't have a name in mind, but there's a lot of like the ones based in Europe that are really good. Broadchurch was really good. Like that was one of my favorite ones. But something along those lines.
A place you're itching to travel to.
Oh, I love to travel. I'm itching to travel to Egypt.
Makes sense. Fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to?
Manjula.
Yes, she was on the podcast as well. That's why I
Yeah.
asked if you do Kamutha because Kamutha, Manjula, I know you guys all kind of grew up in Nigeria.
Yeah, Manjula I actually didn't know in Nigeria. I knew that she grew up in Nigeria after the fact. We
Oh,
we we connected here.
I see. Small world. Okay. Favorite childhood memory?
Definitely in Nigeria. And the get-togethers we would have with other Tamil families in Enugu, where I lived, it was just a lovely time. There was a lot of it was family, but they were sorry, it was family friends, but they were like family, and we just a close-knit community, and yeah, we did a lot together.
What's something you like to do for fun outside of work?
I like reading. I know it's boring, but I do like reading. I don't read as much as I should and would like to, but yes, if I had the time and the energy, I would read.
Favorite movie of all time? It could be Tamil, English, or both.
It sounds cheesy, but I actually really liked Gandhi.
Okay.
This was like a long time ago, but it was one of my favorite. I saw it, I think, at an age where it really influenced me. I saw it when I was a teenager, and it made such an impact on me. So yes, I would say that.
A decision you've been putting off for a while.
There's a lot of decisions I've been putting out for a while, but I think it's a little bit more broad than that. I think it's more thinking about what I want to do in the next phase of my growth and evolution, beyond career. I think that's a more not more a decision, but more just thinking about it and trying to come up with a plan for what I want to do going forward.
What's something that you were wrong about?
Many things. Ooh, what's something that I was wrong about? When I guess I'm wrong about something all the time. I think maybe just, I mean, looking back, and this is more of a career discussion as well, I think maybe what I was wrong about, but since then I've sort of become right about, is how far I can stretch myself and how far I can go. I think I limited myself in my thinking for a long time. And so that hampered my progress at certain points in my career. But then when I did, take the leap and do what I needed to do, I actually realized that I could actually do a lot more than I gave myself credit for. So it's a little bit of self-doubt there that I had to overcome.
What's a purchase you've made that you've splurged on recently in the last few years that you have no regret about?
Oh, hands down, like travel. So we purchased some travel we're going to be doing. No regrets whatsoever. I'll never regret that. I work to travel. I work to enjoy the world.
What's your most favorite place you've traveled to that you would go to multiple times?
Well, we just recently went to Thailand,
Okay,
and Bangkok, and so that's fresh of mind. So I would definitely go there. I go to Morocco. I think if I was to go somewhere, I would go back to Morocco
interesting.
several times.
Me and my wife always have debates because I would love to go to a place I've been to before that we liked so I can explore it further in detail. She's like, there's so much of the world to see. Let's go to new places. It's always a debate between us
You
two.
can do both.
Yeah. A pet peeve of yours.
Inauthenticity. Yeah.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would have any regrets. I'm quite happy with, how things have progressed in my life. I've been very blessed, and I'd like to think that all my decisions, I don't want to look back and regret. So I'm okay.
As not a celebrity, a person whose life you'd love to experience just for one day.
Wow. So, I mean, because right now I'm in the phase of my career where I am, Intrapreneur would be somebody that I don't know if you know
The
who she is,
former
but
CEO of Pepsi, or is she still the CEO?
yeah,
Yeah,
she was a PepsiCo. And now she's retired, but maybe what she was doing during this time, it would be wonderful to,
pick her brain.
yeah, exactly, to get a flavor of that.
What's a book you've read or a podcast you've listened to that's had an impact on you?
Well, a recent podcast, but it's a series of podcasts, is Mel Gibbons, and it's the Let Them theory, which
I just got that book actually as well. Yeah.
right. I
Yeah.
haven't read the book, but I've listened to some podcasts related to it, and I'm really fascinated by it. I think it's great, and it makes a lot of sense, and I'm really enjoying
Hmm.
learning more about that. Yeah,
A belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life.
to focus on my well-being. Very recently, I've started going to the gym, taking care of myself a little bit more. So yes, that has improved
And
things.
and finally, a piece of advice that you'd give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there.
Yeah, well, I'm not a creator by the true sense of the word, but I think a piece of advice would be to take every opportunity that's given and to take risks, to get a little bit outside of one's comfort zone, and to believe in yourself because one is capable of so much more than they think they are.
Love it. Great way to wrap up the podcast. Thank you so much, Sujitha, for jumping on the podcast and kind of sharing your story. If somebody is listening to this episode and they're inspired by kind of what they hear and they want to reach out to you, what is the best way for someone to do that?
Well, LinkedIn would be a great way. I mean, I'm on it I'm quite active on it. And if there's any messages or anything they'd like to pass to me, that would be a great way to connect with me.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And for the audience, as always, thank you guys for listening and giving feedback. On to the next episode.